What's happening, YouTube? This is Robert, and this is video number 10 in my HTML series. In this video, I'm just going to give you a basic introduction to CSS and give you some ideas on how to inject that into your HTML and style up your page in a way that you want it. I'm going to give you some terms that you can use as you build out your page, and if you're doing any searches trying to find key content on how you can do this or that, I'll also make sure that you understand how to search for those. And as I mentioned, get the key elements to start building your first web pages. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and it's styling all those HTML building blocks that we've been using. So all those elements that we've been using to build our web with in HTML, the CSS is going to help us define what we want those elements to look like on the page. What color, what shape, what size. There's a couple different ways that we can inject this, as I mentioned. The first one is inline, and that is where we go into the actual element that we want to style, create a style attribute, and then create a declaration. And a declaration consists of a property and a value. In this case, the style attribute is holding a single declaration. The property color and the value white makes the text turn white. Now we can add additional declarations to this attribute, as many as we want, to style out this particular element. Internal styling takes the style tag and puts it in the head of your document, and then it accesses the H1 and then declares what it wants to happen. There's the declaration. Externally, we can create this basic property here, and we can access the elements that we want, and inside of our curly braces we can create our declarations to say what we want to happen. And then what we can do is we can create a link inside of the head of our current document that points to that document and has this relationship attribute, REL, which tells the browser what the relationship is between our current document and the one we want to point to. Now let's get a good look in the browser what all this means. So I'll create a document, and we're going to title this one CSS intro. And what I'm going to do in this one is I'm going to create a div tag, and inside of that div I'm going to put my H1. Then we can go ahead and create another div beneath that one and create an H2 that says image. And then beneath that heading we can create another div tag. Inside of that we can have our image. I like to put this / at the end of any of my self-closing tags, but it's optional. And then beneath the image I'm going to create a description inside of a paragraph, and I just use the simple lorem ipsum. Beneath all of that I'm going to create one last div with another H2 inside of it named main content with a couple paragraphs of lorem ipsum content. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this and open it up in the browser, and there you have it. We have our most important heading, our image H2 heading with our image, a description of our image, followed by main content and 2 pieces of content. Now, what is obvious about this is this does not look good as far as a web page goes. If I wanted this heading to be my main header, I would want it to stretch all the way across and look a certain way. So let's start there. Let's build up this H1 into a heading for our page. So what I can do is I can go into my H1 in the opening tag, and I can create a style attribute. And the first thing we'll do is we're going to say background color. We're just changing it to blue, good old regular blue. Save that, and we have a blue background to our H1. So let's go ahead and transfer that H1 up to our div. So we took the style out of the H1 and put it inside the div, the background color blue. Let's take a look at that. Looks basically the same, doesn't it? Well, something cool is we can put as many declarations as we want inside of our style attribute. So we have background color blue is one declaration. Let's go ahead and center our text, and how we can do that is using text align, center, semicolon. Save, refresh our page, and there you go. We have our text right in the middle. Let's do one last thing and add a color, which will change our actual text color, and let's just say yellow with a semicolon after. Go ahead and save that, and there you go. Now we have our centered heading, the H1 most important heading, inside of a div that's background color is blue, whose text is centered. Now let's take this entire section that contains our image. Let's take our image heading, our image, and the description, and put it inside of a box. All of that content is contained inside of this div right here. So let's create a style with a background color. We changed it to light gray, refresh, And there you have it. Image heading, the image itself, and the description paragraph are all in this light gray box. Let's go ahead and center all of our text, both the heading and the description, and then let's also decrease the size of this image so it actually fits on our page and inside of our content. If you scroll over, you can see it goes way outside the content because it's such a big image, so we need to resize that thing. So back in this div, we can actually go ahead and copy this text align center, since we've already done it once before, and put it right in there. Save that. And before we jump over and look, let's go ahead and also go down here to our image and put in a little style, and the style that we want to affect is going to be the height and width. So first of all, height, we're going to put auto, and then the width, we're going to put 400 pixels. Save that, refresh, and there you go. But now we notice that our main content doesn't have a color. Let's add to that color. And all we're going to do is the same thing. We're going to use background color, light gray, but we want all of our text to stay to the left, so we're not going to keep that piece of it. So let's actually just go ahead and take this entire style tag, copy it, and put it in this div down here. And then we can delete the text align center. Save that, refresh, and there we go. So now we've seen how to center our text, we've seen how to create some backgrounds, but let's look down here at this gray box, and we have our main content and our two pieces of content, which is our two paragraphs, and that content is aligned to the left, but maybe we want a little bit of separation between the edge here and the content so it looks a little bit better. Now how we can do that is with padding. So padding separates content from the walls of the box. So padding, colon, and then we'll say 5 pixels for now with the semicolon after. Let's save that, refresh, and there you go. Now our content has at least 5 pixels of padding between the content and the walls of the box. We added 5 pixels to the top, left, right, and bottom. Let's make it 50. Refresh, and now you can see a much greater padding between, but you notice a little bit more on top. Why is that? The answer is because the browser is automatically going to create margins and paddings that you're going to want to reset, and I'll teach you how to do that in another video. But for now, there's margin, which is the distance between this div and this div, and as you can see, it's represented by this white space here. One thing you can do is Control-Shift-J or Control-Shift-I, go over to your elements, and you can go use your selector here, and you can hover over any element and see some of the differences in how they sit inside of each box and what's in between them. For example, this paragraph has margin top and bottom, so that's represented in the orange, and the paragraph itself is blue, represented in blue. It's a block level tag, so it stretches all the way across the screen, and our div stretches all the way across the screen. It has that main content in there with padding all around it, except for the blue box is the main content area, and the green inside of that box is the padding. And then our content, you can see the margins above and below each piece of content. And we'll remove all that. We'll learn how to remove all that so we can start at 0 and build in our own margin and padding. But that is for a later video. One last thing is that if you look right now, you notice that all the text is the same kind. If we wanted a paragraph to come in here and look different than the heading, or if we wanted most of the content on the page to look one way and then switch it another way. For example, we could keep what's called serif right now, and serif has the little edges to the text. Now sans serif is without those edges, and we might want to switch to a font family that allows us to use text without edges for, let's say, this paragraph right here. So let's go to that paragraph, and what we can do is we can create a style tag again with font family, and we're just going to say Helvetica with a semicolon after. Let's save that, and here you go. Now our paragraph looks much different in the type of font rather than the typical serif that the browser defaults to. Let's do some other things to that font. Let's change the font size to 30 pixels, and we're going to give it a text decoration of underline. Let's save that and take a look. There we go. We have size of 30 pixels, and then we have a text decoration, which is underline. And let's go ahead and change the color of this text too. I'm going to make it white. Refresh, and you've got white text. And there's a lot of other things we can do with this. But now we've started to build out our page to make it look a little bit better in how we want to structure a website. Now let's take a look at the difference between inline and internal CSS. So to get started, if you remember, internal CSS is going to be used up in the head tag with a style tag. And inline is going to be inside of the element, and what we want to do is move it from the inside of this element, because as you can see, if this page gets extremely long, we're going to be sitting here styling each individual element, and we don't want to do that. That's going to take forever, and it's hard to maintain. So if you have things that change throughout your document over time, you're going to have to sit here and figure out what's changing inside of the CSS as well, and we want to start to separate those two things. Let's start right here in this div. We have a style of background color blue and text align center color yellow, those three declarations inside of that div which control the H1. So up in our head we have our style tag, and we can create access to the H1 by typing H1, and this selects that H1. Then we create two curly braces, and in between those curly braces we're going to create declarations. So background color blue, text align center, and color yellow. I targeted our H1, and I did mean to target our div because that's what we're taking it out of. Let's go back inside of our div, delete all of that, and then I'll make the correction so that we're accessing the div here. As you can see, we want our background color to be blue, our text align center, and our color yellow. And all we did was move it from this div into selecting a div, and nothing should change on our page, right? Now you can see that our header didn't change because the background is blue and the color is yellow, but some of the other pieces of our content did change. And the reason is that now with the way that we're doing internal access, when we access a div, we need to be more specific. See, this div right here is the start of a div, but we also have this div here and we have this div here. And what's happening is the style is occurring up here for all of the divs, and it's accessing each one of these and then getting restyled when it comes back down the page down here. Some of the things that we don't restyle end up sticking all the way from here. It cascades down, which is why it's called a cascading style sheet. So how do we change that? How do we correct that? Well, this is going to be where our two attributes that are very helpful come in. And the first one is ID. ID allows us to create any name and then access any name right here with the hashtag. The ID is accessed using a hashtag. So we're going to delete this div, create a hashtag, and that hashtag is any name. That's the name that we created. Refresh our page, and now our page is back the way that we wanted it. We have another div here with the style background color light gray, text align center. First thing, let's create an ID for this. I'm going to call it second div, and then we have second div right here. Now what we can do is go ahead and create the background color light gray and text align center. So let's go ahead and delete all the content in there just to be sure and take a look, and no changes occurred. Let's take a look at our image. We're just going to access all images, make their height auto and their width 400 pixels. Let's go ahead and delete the style attribute out of that. And while we're at it, we're also going to style this div with an ID, but this time rather than styling only this paragraph, I'm going to style both of the paragraphs at the same time inside of my style tag. So let's go ahead and style the third div first, and we're going to delete out the style attribute. Now what I'm going to do is create that paragraph that allows me to do all of the paragraphs. Now here's the trick, is that with IDs you can only have one unique ID per page. So if I wanted to style both paragraphs at the same time without affecting this paragraph, I couldn't access all paragraphs. Rather than creating an ID for each and styling each, what we have is classes. And a class uses a dot notation, or we're just going to say styled P. On this paragraph and this paragraph, we're going to create a class styled P. With classes, you're allowed to access multiple at one time, and this will access both of these without accessing this one, just the solution we're looking for. And let's take a look. We got both of these paragraphs to take the effects that we wanted, and we left this other paragraph alone, and we're well on our way to understanding how to design a web page. as always, if you have any questions, go ahead and hit that comment area, and I will see you in the next video.